Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Renee, and thanks for having me today. So I am going to share my screen. Today am going to be talking about, do you all see just one slide? Make sure I did it correct.
Yes.
Great, thank you. Going to be talking about the Ohio Children's Initiative CANS as it relates to the new OhioRISE, Ohio Department of Medicaid's Managed Care Program. So sort of keeping with the time constraints, this is really information that was selected to be an overview about the CANS and then some information or resource slides just for you to go back to, some important intercepts or considerations that you may want to think about within your organization as it applies to OhioRISE. All right, so I am going to spend just a smidge of time just to sort of level the playing field to get us all on the same page about what the Ohio Children's Initiative CANS is. And so the CANS is a functional assessment tool. It's an assessment tool that really helps integrate and organize key pieces of information about a young person and family around their needs and strengths. It really helps sort of organize across multiple key domains in a young person's life, not only what the need is, but also how urgently that need might need some attention from a care planning team. And the goal of the CANS is really to support a young person and family's transformational change goals. And it is very rooted in person-centered change. A thing to sort of note about the CANS that's different than maybe some other assessment tools that we're familiar with is that the CANS is really foundationally based on consensus ratings and encourages the use of multiple informants, multiple perspectives, and sort of in order to gain sort of that comprehensive picture about a young person and a family's needs and strengths, it incorporates all of those sort of multiple perspectives. And then we do some shared visioning and some consensus ratings so that we're sure that we're all really understanding the young person and family's perspective and we're all on the same page. You know, I think that the CANS, when it's used across systems, like we're going to be using it here in Ohio, it really levels the playing field and gives all parties around the care planning table, including the youth and parent, sort of that equal partnership in care, because it gives us all a shared common language so that when we're talking about an item like family functioning or anger control, we're all using or are rooted in sort of the same perspective or framework about what that item might mean. So it really helps us have a common language that also gives or elevates the voice of a young person and family. So these next two slides are really just pictorial representations. They're actually two of my favorite slides that we use in CANS training, because I think it helps depict sort of the difference between a traditional assessment model, which is what we're all most familiar with, and what the CANS is and how the CANS is different. So you're going to hear the word Communimetrics. Communimetrics is a word that you might not find in the Webster Dictionary, but Communimetrics is really what the CANS is, which is a communication tool. It organizes and integrates information to communicate to other parties and a young person and family information about that young person that's gathered through the assessment process. And so traditional assessments or clinometric, psychometric tools sort of look in this way, where there's information gathered by an expert. The expert sort of interprets that information that's gathered and then creates the results or the findings. And that has sort of a linear or unidirectional process to it. And this next slide depicts how the CANS is very different than our traditional assessment approach. And so this is really a nice picture of what Communimetrics is. There's a lot, you see that the young person with the orange circle here is much larger. They are central. The CANS is also central. That expert that we saw on the previous slide is right here, and they are not any larger or bigger in size than anyone else represented here on this picture. There's multiple perspectives that are interconnected. So this really depicts sort of that integration of multiple perspectives where we all come together and get consensus and some agreements around those areas of need and strengths. So I think that's a nice example of sort of how this assessment is different than others. So moving into how the CANS is going to be integrated or used in the OhioRISE program, there are two types of CANS here in Ohio that we'll be using. The first is the comprehensive CANS, which is the CANS that we train on. And the second is the brief CANS. So the brief CANS is really a truncated version of the comprehensive CANS, and it includes core items that we believe to be important in making sort of those eligibility or level of care determinations. And the comprehensive CANS is going to be used for all of the ongoing assessment and progress monitoring throughout the course of care. So the brief CANS, as you can see here, is really used at the doorways, used as an initial assessment, and then all of the ongoing progress monitoring and population health activities will be conducted or using the comprehensive CANS. The comprehensive CANS also has, the 50 core items plus additional submodules that really help the team focus in and understand key pieces of information about items, such as if you have a young person that does have a substance use issue, for example. The substance use section has a submodule that is then completed to really help identify exactly the areas that are important in care planning in the future, where exactly those needs are, so that you're able to perfectly tailor your care planning and treatment planning around the exact needs of the young person. The CANS there is a decision support model that was created, and the decision support model uses categories or a set of categories of CANS ratings, and then those ratings sort of dictate or determine recommendations for care planning and different levels of care, like out-of-home placements and residential treatment. The CANS is being used, like I shared, for eligibility purposes into OhioRISE, eligibility for various levels of care as it relates to out-of-home placement or residential treatment, and as well as some services. And we'll look at a slide in a moment that depicts that. So it's important to note that the CANS is not a diagnostic assessment or a diagnostic evaluation. It is, as we shared, it is the output of an assessment process. So it really organizes key pieces of information about a young person that are relevant and critical to care planning. So many youth will have their CANS assessment, but they will also still need a diagnostic assessment. So, here on the left, the CANS is rooted in information gathering, integrating multiple storytellers that's then put into one single agreed upon narrative. There is some decision support modeling that we'll look at in a couple slides. So for OhioRISE, the CANS will be used to determine eligibility. It will be used as part of the 1915C waiver for level of care eligibility. The CANS will also be recommending the different tiers of care coordination. So as you're aware, there's 3 distinct tiers of care coordination in the OhioRISE program. And based on the CANS scores, that will be one large piece of information that's used to determine the stratification of those tiers. And then for these out-of-home placement treatment settings like qualified residential treatment programs, QRTP, or mental health residential. It will assist in identifying substance use disorder needs and potential residential needs. It will be used for eligibility determinations related to intermediate care facilities that have the intensive behavioral support rate add-on, the ICF placements, and as well as psychiatric residential treatment facilities, otherwise known as PRTFs, which don't currently exist in Ohio, but will exist in Ohio come, I think the launch date is January of 2023. It's a new level of care for residential treatment here in Ohio. And then as we shared, progress monitoring different outcomes. The care coordinators based on the tier all will be completing the CANs, the comprehensive CANs in various time-based intervals as indicated by the Ohio Department of Medicaid's care coordination rules. We'll be using it for population health and aggregation of information and data over time. The CANs foundationally, believes that by the way in which we use data, gather data, and the types of data that we gather can alter or shift our health and human services systems. And so the CANs information and assessment sort of process and the outcomes that are generated can be used at each level of the system, the individual program and sort of broader policy state level. And so that's a really exciting part of this tool, is that we'll be able to, the CANs assessment information will be able to inform decisions that are made on that individual level, inform decisions that are made on the programmatic or organizational level, as well as inform decisions that are made at that state policy level over time once we get this up and running and launched. So it's exciting if you're excited by data like some of us. So this is really just a picture with lots of circles, but just as a way to sort of help piece it all together. So this is the system as a whole pieced together. So you start on the left here in the blue, and this is all of the activities that will be happening in OhioRISE eligibility and enrollment. So, the CANs functional assessment is a large part of eligibility into the program. The CANs will be used as a part of 1915C waiver eligibility. And then over here under acute need, inpatient and PRTF, this circle is just signifying that those youth who are placed in an inpatient psychiatric hospital or in a PRTF placement are actually auto-enrolled into the OhioRISE program. And so I went through and inserted these little like thought bubbles that just indicates intercepts where the CANs may be referenced in rule or is sort of a special call out. So, the eligibility, the OhioRISE eligibility rule does have reference to CANs. So once young people are in the program, then there's this middle orange section, which is all the care coordination and the care management entities. So the 3 tiers of care coordination, that stratification is informed by the CANs. And then there's also Ohio Department of Medicaid rules that dictate the time-based intervals in which ongoing CANs assessments need to occur. And this just indicates here that the care management entities are a part of that care coordination process. And the care coordinators will be creating and using child and family teams and creating child and family centered care plans, crisis care plans, and regularly updating the CANs. And then as a part of OhioRISE, on this green side, the far right, this is where all of our services and supports are delivered, right? So care planning and care coordination happens in the middle, and its connection to all of these services and supports that are on the right-hand side here in green. So as many of you are aware, the new and enhanced OhioRISE services are things like the intensive home-based treatment umbrella programs, IHBT, MST, and FFT. MRSS is a new and enhanced program in the OhioRISE service menu. And you'll note that there are some the Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services has some rules that are embedded, that have the CANs embedded within them related to MRSS and IHBT. So this is just sort of like the places in which the CANs will sort of fit in this broader structure. And then I thought we could spend a little bit of time. Many of you may have already, copiously gone through sort of this baseline eligibility, but I wanted to just give you a little snapshot of what types of CANs scores help stratify young people, sort of what are those eligibility thresholds. So I think the most important to think about when we think about sort of the system as we know it and the system come July 1 is really understanding that baseline threshold of who will be eligible for OhioRISE and will now be enrolled in this OhioRISE program. And so you see here that on the CANs, a young person simply needs to have one actionable rating in one of these areas that are identified here from the behavior emotional needs section. And then they have to have one or, so 1.2 or 1.3. So they need one actionable risk item or one actionable functioning impairment, and they would be eligible for OhioRISE. So I think that's really important when we think about the youth that we're serving or connected to in our communities now, when we're envisioning these new intersections and new workflow. I'm not going to spend a ton of time focusing in on moderate care and intensive care, but these are really there more so that so you have as a reference to go back to. So the difference in moderate is that you still need to have an actionable item in the behavior emotional needs section, but you still have to have a 2.2 or, so a risk or functioning issue. But the intensity of that issue increases here. You see the action item needs to be a 3 or 2 or more of those. So those are the nuances to pay attention to. And then on the intensive side, the key difference is that now the caregiver resources needs section, there needs to be a critical need in the caregiver or the sort of environment of the young person to qualify for intensive care coordination. So this is just really another resource slide for you when you're thinking about sort of tier 1 limited care coordination that will be delivered by Aetna Better Health of Ohio. Then tier 2 and tier 3, the moderate and intensive care coordination that will be delivered by your local care management entities, those 18 agencies that were selected to be the 20 care management entities. Some of the things to consider or to expect for families that are sort of embedded within their model. But I think it's important to note that the CANs will be updated regardless of their tier every 90 days. The comprehensive CANs will be administered by the care coordination team or when a significant change in circumstances happens. And then the other important note here, not necessarily CANs related, but I think important when you're planning sort of how your teams are going to intersect with OhioRISE and your workflow internally, is that the child and family team meetings for limited will be held every 90 days, for moderate care coordination every 60 days, and for intensive every 30 days. And for those who are not an OhioRISE care coordinator, it's important for you to know that you'll be participating in those teams as system partners, right? So that you can sort of expect when you'll be invited and at what cadence those meetings will be held for your participation as a system partner, provider, or support. The other place where CAN sort of intersects is in this July 1st, sort of the pre-enrollment period. So there is a auto-enrollment to OhioRISE, and this slide just depicts who those youth are that are being auto-enrolled into the OhioRISE program ahead of July 1. So there's a 2-month look back for any young person who, based on a claim submission, is in substance use disorder residential treatment in the last 2 months. They will be auto-enrolled. And any young person who is currently placed in a children's residential center or a residential parenting facility that is also in Title IV custody in the last 2 months will be auto-enrolled into OhioRISE. The 3-month look back, any young person that is open and receiving services in an intensive home-based treatment program in the last 3 months, auto-enrolled. Any young person who has a CANS assessment that's been entered into the CANS IT system in the last 90 days that looks out, that meets that threshold that we looked at, they will be auto-enrolled. Any young person in the last 3 months in an ICF that has the IBS rate add-on, and then any young person in a developmental center in the last 3 months, auto-enrolled into OhioRISE. And then our 6-month look back, any young person that has had an inpatient hospitalization or an admission for mental illness or substance use disorder in the last 6 months is auto-enrolled, and any young person in an out-of-state PRTF level of residential care would be auto-enrolled. And that auto-enrollment simply means that their entrance into the program wasn't determined by a pre-existing CANS assessment, except for that highlighted group. These youth will get a CANS assessment within their first 30 days after enrollment. It just means they didn't need that as their doorway in. So this slide just sort of very broadly paints a picture of after July 1st, how young people will enter the program. So post July 1, when OhioRISE goes live, it is in 8 days. So we're very excited. There is a rolling enrollment. So entry into OhioRISE will come in these main three ways. Through a CANS assessment, which will then recommend a tier of care coordination from any intercept in the community. So any certified CANS assessor in our community that screens or believes they are working with a young person that could be eligible for OhioRISE can conduct a CANS assessment, enter that into the IT portal, and that will be their eligibility determination. In real time, the CANS assessor will see whether or not that young person preliminarily meets the baseline threshold for OhioRISE programming, and that official enrollment would come 2 business days later. So, and their rolling enrollment, meaning that the actual active date will be the date that that CANS assessment was entered into the IT system. So that really opens up, like, the doorways to OhioRISE are many, and it is really low barrier, right? So many certified CANS assessors are very multidisciplinary. It is not just behavioral health providers that we're training and certifying. And so this means that young people at whatever intercept in the community can have a pathway to OhioRISE for this specialized care coordination service and the new and enhanced Medicaid or program services. The next pathway might be through an MRSS encounter, where a brief CANS is administered as part of the MRSS encounter. And then that third sort of distinct pathway would be through that inpatient hospitalization or a PRTF admission. This sort of just outlines the cross-system use of the CANS. So the Ohio Department of Medicaid, OhioRISE program is using the CANS, the brief CANS, for eligibility into the program, and how they're using the comprehensive CANS, which we've already reviewed. It also outlines sort of how the other system partners are using the CANS. So this is being rolled out across and implemented across many of the child serving systems. So the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services is using the CANS within the Family First Prevention Services Act to assess and justify the use of congregate care, otherwise known as QRTP, Qualified Residential Treatment Programs. So they have certified CANS assessors that are using this assessment to justify the use of congregate care as part of the Family First Prevention Services Act. The Ohio Department of Developmental Disabilities is using it as part of level of care determinations for ICF facilities with that intensive behavioral support rate add-on. It is such a mouthful every time. I have trouble spitting that out. And then other systems like the Ohio Department of Youth Services, local family and children first councils, Ohio MAS, behavioral health providers will be using, you'll see this in some of those service models like MRSS, IHBT, et cetera. So this is really just a different way to capture the information that we just spoke about. So who can be an assessor? I briefly just will touch on the fact that in OhioRISE or in Ohio, licensed and unlicensed professionals can be trained and certified in the CANS assessment. The way, the sort of requirements are that you complete live training and that you pass the certification exam at 0.70 or higher. And then to maintain your certification, you just have to do an annual recertification test. There, at this time, is not annual live training that is required. And then if you are a CANS assessor or want to be a CANS assessor for the purposes of the Family First Prevention Services Act, that outlines sort of in code or in rule what a qualified individual is. You'd have to sort of meet that criteria, but I know we're not here to talk about Family First today, so that's a resource for you to look at after. And then I just want to briefly talk a little bit about what the CANS IT portal is. So the Ohio Department of Medicaid created and owns the CANS IT portal. And really this, foundational to the CANS is that we want, one of the benefits is that CANS build off of other CANS. And, the CANS really does a nice job of capturing sort of the fluidity of human nature and progress and change that we make and growth over time. And so, it is very dynamic in the way that, you may be progressing in a handful of life domains in one area, but then struggling in another at point A, and then at the next administration, point B, you may have totally sort of started to struggle in some of the areas that you were previously doing well in, but really made a lot of gains in the other. And that's just like the way of human nature, right? Like we struggle and we change and we grow and we it's very fluid. And so by having a centralized portal where certified assessors can go in and look up the history of each CANS assessment, it really gives us as assessors and part of the care planning team the ability to reduce the number of times a family and child has to retell their story. But it also really accurately captures the change over time. And you really start to be able, for children and families as well, to understand, sort of to get curious about how things have improved and changed over time, because we'll have it all in one place. So it creates that centralization of documenting those CANs so that we really can not only promote the idea of one child, one CANs, but we can put it into action in our systems across child serving systems and in our care and treatment planning. So it really improves continuity and collaboration. It is also where that immediate decision support modeling outputs occur. Like I shared, that happens in real time. But it's sort of like a preliminary, that's a preliminary recommendation that is like 99.9% accurate, but their final determination does come within 2 business days later. So I always do just put that caution out there. And so we can also use that to track trends and outcomes from a population health perspective over time. And any certified CANS assessor has access to that system. And there are different sort of protections in place to ensure that confidentiality and protected health information is protected, and that people have to sort of attest to only looking at records that are appropriate for them. So there are several different layers of protections within that. So these next couple of slides are really resource slides, and I'm probably over time. Just for you to look at later about how to get certified, as well as if you're interested in learning more about the IT system, here's several live links that you can click on to be redirected to CANS FAQs, as well as the different user guides for the new IT portal. And I think that concludes my very quick overview of the CANS as it relates to OhioRISE. Happy to